Hello and welcome to GigaOm Live. I am your host, Johnny Baldisberger, and I'm joined by analyst Enrico Signoretti and Jason Collier. Now on the show, we talk about the tech news of the week. Jason drags me kicking and screaming into the financial aspect of the tech industry, and Enrico talks about technology beyond my ken. So it's an education for me. I hope it's an education for you. This is a live show, so if you would like to make comments, ask questions, or bring anything to our attention, feel free to just type it in the chat and we will look at that as soon as possible. Otherwise, hello Enrico, hello Jason.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Or
afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.
You know what? Let's say afternoon because we're going to start in Europe today. Now I mentioned it before. I pulled the curtain back before and mentioned that we have a shared doc where we put the news in, so we can figure out what we really want to talk about, what's really newsworthy. And this week there was just a line item that said France went crazy with private certified clouds, which caught my eyes immediately. I need to know more. Enrico, tell me more about France losing its mind.
Well, it was a new legislation that was approved a few weeks ago, I think, and I didn't pay any attention to it until I talked with a vendor that is based in France, and they were very happy about it. And so the reason is that France is building this kind of certification that is now necessary to store all types of sensitive data for any kind of organization in France. It means that you can store anything on Amazon or Google or any international cloud provider. So the cloud provider has to be in France with its infrastructure in France, and it has to be certified to deal with this data. So some characteristics that are probably beyond the traditional, data center. And of course, OVH is already certified among others. But we're talking about, having local providers to do cloud. And I really struggle to understand why. I mean, I understand why a French government want to do something like this. They want to protect the business of, their local companies, but at the same time it's the opposite of the cloud. I mean, having a local provider, non-international provider, especially for large organization, is a problem. I understand the Patriot Act and everything, but we have encryption and everything, and why somebody should stay with the data on these providers that usually are smaller than the mega providers, and they don't have the same level of services in terms of quality and quantity of services. So I mean, for me it's crazy, and the problem is that there is some lobbying about this on the European Commission, so that there is the hope that other countries will join this kind of initiatives. So we will have a lot of very small, incredibly small in sometimes providers, and they are certified, but I'm pretty sure that the cost will be higher than anything we can expect, and in many cases not the level of the service won't be comparable to what we expect from a major cloud provider.
I'm guessing you're going to see nothing like 5 nines reliability. And, when you're talking about, it's got to be certified, who's doing the certification? You're going to have a bunch of politicians out there saying, oh, that looks good. The lights are blinking, right? What's that actually going to look like, right? Honestly, I trust my data to the computer scientists, not the politicians. But
yeah, you're right. I mean, we have encryption, we have everything. I mean, I thought for quite some time that we were past the moment of the Patriot Act. I mean, if you live in Europe in a major in US, and that's okay. But with encryption, if you have Microsoft Azure in Milan or or AWS in Rome or whatever they have their data center. So your data is in Italy, and it's encrypted. So only you, if you manage encryption correctly, I mean, only you have access to the data. So what's the problem and with it? And I don't know. I for quite some time I was curious about this project or initiative that the European Communion had, that was a sort of federation of clouds. So they started talking about federating multiple clouds and having, something that could resemble a big Amazon with all these regions, but each region is a cloud from one country. And it sort of, it made sense to me. I mean, you can't build something as big as Amazon, but actually you can have a federation of cloud that could, share the same services, the same kind of infrastructure. They are local to your country, but you can have service from other countries, same bills, same services, same everything. But this goes beyond that. I mean, we are talking about, segregating data in physical location that are.
Yeah, you hit on another good point too, is when you think about it, the services that you won't be able to get. I mean, Amazon and Microsoft and Google, they spend a lot of time innovating these services they're plugging on top of their cloud platforms. And they spend a lot of money doing that, right? They spend a ton of money basically going through and innovating. I mean, what's this gonna look like if it's basically restricted into that zone? If it's not gonna be, one of the big 3 tier ones, I mean, is it just gonna effectively revert back to what co-location was, right? Oh, you're just putting your servers in a building, and guess what? You got to control the infrastructure. It's almost like a step back from where cloud is taking us with the services it can offer. And the way in which it offers it, doing like, data mining and analytics on top of your platforms, right? That Amazon has been phenomenal at. It's almost like it's kind of a step back in the way of thinking for security purposes, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's curious.
Well, I think again, the government stepped in to protect the business of their companies, and in fact, OVH and a few others were already working on this kind of certification. So that's the idea. I mean, the only thing is, protect your local employees.
They also may be doing it to try to pull specifically the big 3 providers to have data centers within the country to basically generate revenue, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Actually, that makes a lot more sense now.
Anyway, I think it is, it raises a lot of doubts, and in the long term it won't pay off. But that's the thing.
So I think with that, we're going to get into Jason's favorite part. Now, Jason, I have to ask, are you wearing an Atari shirt? Because I can't see the logo.
No, I am not. So you'll be happy. I'm wearing a NASA shirt. So it's, I think, my first time on the show not wearing an Atari shirt.
Change scares me, and I don't like it, but I'll roll with it.
At least it's NASA, right?
Yeah, so, no, it's hey, cool. We're still representing the nerdiness. And your cat has decided to join us.
Yeah, it's like that's Larry. We got 3 of them: Larry, Moe, and Curly. Got the 3 Stooges. So.
We were doing some videos for GigaOm at one point, and halfway through one of them, Enrico bent over, picked up his cat, and yelled at the camera before putting him down. I think he was frustrated having to film hours of footage. On that note, unrelated to cats, we have some financial news on Wasabi.
Yeah.
Also with cloud storage. So what's going on with that?
And what's really interesting about that, so and Wasabi is kind of a, they're one of the tier 2s, like we were kind of just talking about. They're one of those tier 2 providers, kind of behind Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, one of the tier 2s, and they just pulled in a C round of funding at 122 million, and then 3 weeks later they pulled in another 25 million. Now the important thing about that everybody's like, well, why wasn't that lumped in? One of the things that is important as a company evolves, and you start seeing this around the C round, is strategic investment starting to come in. So this is strategic investors are other investors from other companies that are they effectively collaborate. They make a good partnership. One of the, like, we ended up having, one of the companies I was at where we were doing HCI stuff, we ended up getting strategic funding from Lenovo because we were using Lenovo platforms to do it. And it looks like, Western Digital, their investment arm is what kind of put it, the 25 million into Wasabi, right? They're selling a lot of hard drives. They're like, hey, you're doing good business for us. And this is also where, kind of one of those interesting places where mergers and acquisitions can start to come in, right? I'm not saying, Western Digital is going to do that, but they're getting a stake in the company because they believe in what it's doing is fitting the strategic. And this is where kind of the strategic investor piece comes in. It is of strategic asset to Western Digital to put money into this. So you start to see this a lot around, like I said, that kind of that C round and above level of funding, and it's honestly good to see. And I think there are a lot of questions like, well, why did they bring on 25 million after they brought on 122? I can assure you that was going on, the negotiations during that entire C round negotiation. Usually just takes a little longer for strategics to kick in sometimes. When you're looking at it, you're like, well, so that when you think about it now, that brings the round up to about right at 150 million, which is a pretty healthy and a pretty standard C round when you're looking to go kind of pre-IPO in this. So it's going to be interesting to see where that works out. Another thing, a very wise investor, Bill Gurley from Benchmark Capital, told us one time, we had raised a C round right after, like 9 months after we raised a B round. We didn't need the money. And Bill, who led our B round, said, gentlemen, my advice is it's best to eat the hors d'oeuvres when they're being served, which is actually a pretty about it, because you may not need the money now, but you might need it later. And guess what? It may not be there. Market conditions can change really rapidly, as we've seen in 2020, right? Market conditions can change, in the blink of an eye. So you know what? Take the money when it's there. Because you're never really quite sure if you're going to need it in the future. So that's clearly what we see in the way that they did this round. And I say, congrats to Wasabi on that round. It's a good, healthy C round for them.
Yeah, if I can, from the technology perspective, having this kind of relationship with Western Digital or Wasabi is fundamental for the future. The hard drive is disappearing from the standard data center, enterprise data center, while these hyperscalers are, want specific hard drives for their business. We already heard about, multi-actuator hard drives, or, specific hard drives with APIs that are more, aligned with what these vendors do, et cetera, et cetera. So having this kind of relation means that, they really have a connection, and they can ask more to the hard drive vendor. So I think it's from this point of view, it is really important. And not only, as you said, if they want to give you some money, it's good. But I think from the technology perspective, it would be even better at this point. And Wasabi is doing pretty well. They are opening additional data center across the world. They have a channel partner program that makes a lot of sense. And they are, a niche player, but, they are doing one thing very well. Now that we are more multi-cloud than in the past, I think this is the right moment to do these kind of things. Specific service that works very well, and, it's cost effective, makes a lot of sense.
So moving on, it's all, look, I'm gonna be honest, it's all financial from here on. It's all the news, it's everything. And I understand how the world works. I know that money drives everything, including innovation and technology. It's just as someone who is very bad with money, I like to pretend it doesn't, which is probably why I'm so bad with money. Um, so let's talk about Cheercoin driving up the prices of their HDDs.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Cheercoin is a new crypto coin. It's different from most of the other crypto coins because you don't need this fancy hardware to mine it. Actually, you just need a little amount of CPU and a huge amount of hard drives to store, signatures and stuff. So to prove that you have this piece of information necessary to rebuild the the ledger or whatever it works. I mean, I didn't go in detail with it, but actually it's smart enough. So the high level introduction was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, you don't need a lot of CPU power, and every spare hard drive that you have in your home lab could be used to mine this Chia coin. So the idea is that actually I wanted it is in my to-do list. I mean, I would like to mine it. I did some mining in the past with an experimental ARM-based cluster, and of course it was to understand how it works, not to make money, because I think I never made. I mean, I probably spent more than uh, I spent, and that's it. And and the problem was that okay, you can understand, but if you don't have these GPUs or ASICs or stuff, you can't mine anything. And these kind of accelerators need a lot of power to work. While this is mechanism is very very efficient from the power consumption point of view. On the other hand, yes, I mean people are interested in this kind of technology, and they want the easy money, and why not try this one as well? So they are starting to buying additional hard drives and SSDs and things like that, which is interesting. I mean, now especially now that in the consumer space, the hard drives is practically dead.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at, kind of you look through some of the statistics. They say they can, a 512 gig SSD would be filled up in 40 days and a 2 terabyte drive in 160 days. So yeah, you could chew through some storage. But the hard drives guys love this. Uh, but yeah, it's also interesting that it's really not that CPU slash GPU intensive compared to the other mining algorithms. And honestly, the others didn't used to be until the hash got so big that it needed you just need a lot more power to get anything out of it. Interestingly enough, Bitcoin started when I was doing a company. We were doing some R&D work that ended up turning into a hedge fund. We ended up building a supercomputer that placed on the top 500 out of commodity components. We built the whole thing for 65,000. Then this whole Bitcoin thing came out, and we was like, oh, this is never going to work. We calculated about 10 years ago that if we would have stopped that whole hedge fund nonsense and just started mining Bitcoin with the processing power we had, it would have been worth about $4 billion 10 years ago. Hindsight, right?
Well, actually, I was surprised after reading of Cheercoin that uh, not Western Digital nor the guys at Seagate are supporting these initiatives. I mean, for companies like Nvidia, mining was a gold mine, if we can
Yeah.
use. And now actually they are trying to exit this business. I mean, the latest GPUs that they are launching for gaming are not enabled, are not optimized for mining,
Mm-hmm.
and because probably all the gamers were pissed that they were not able to find the latest and the greatest GPUs for their hobby. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Nvidia don't want you to mine too much, and also because it's always presented as a very, very bad thing for the planet and everything. So probably Nvidia started to say, okay, we have AI, we have gaming, we have everything. Maybe mining is not, no longer something that we are really interested in, and makes a lot of sense from this point of view.
Yeah, it consumes a lot of power, that's for sure.
So the final ticket on today's conversation is the fact that Infinite.io's domain name, infinite.io, is up for grabs as the co-founder confirmed that the company shut down. Now, I went and checked it out while we were sitting here. The domain is going for $75,000, and I'm going to admit I am shocked it is still available. I'm shocked that in the time we've been talking this morning, it hasn't already sold. Anytime I see popular word domain, it's like, well, that's gone. That's already taken. But it is still, if you're listening to this right now and $75,000 is burning a hole in your pocket, it can be yours right this minute. So other than the fact that another company could grab this up, other than it be like I mentioned, infinite is a good word. It's a good attention getting thing. What is the importance of this domain being up for grabs?
Well, the like Enrico and I were talking about this, and this is an important lesson in timing when you're doing a startup, right? And I think a big thing that hurt Infinite IO is their technology. One, it's a feature that enhances other NAS devices, right? It basically it was a metadata server, and it's meant to speed kind of file and folder access. Problem was it's hardware. In an ever evolving world where we're looking at hybrid cloud solutions where you almost always have to have a virtual appliance, it was still a physical appliance, and it was one of those things that they were looking at that was basically in R&D. It was working on getting done. And I think the biggest problem was they also had and they went through to B round. I think they had about 13.5 million roughly in funding. And they had, I think they landed some big government deal, and unfortunately, due to COVID, it effectively pushed that, went on kind of this indefinite hold. And this is one of those things where you hear a lot in startups. I'd rather be lucky than good, and and a lot of startups really, I mean, it is about timing. There's so many times I've seen startups that had such a phenomenal idea, and it was just too soon for the market. The market didn't, accept it at the time. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, an old friend of mine, and he was actually on council for Webvan back in the day. And Webvan took a ton of money. I think they had a total of $2 billion in VC over the time they were starting that up. And now when you look at what Webvan is, it's like after Amazon bought Whole Foods, is basically grocery delivery to your house, right? Except they were doing it back in the the late 90s. And the reality was it was a market timing issue. The market wasn't ready for it. And the infrastructure they had to build, whereas Amazon had slowly built that infrastructure over decades, they were trying to build it in a couple of years, and the market just wasn't ready to accept it, and the costs for doing it were too much. So this is one of those things where, market timing is the market was looking for hybrid cloud solutions, and this was still basically stuck in the physical world, right? And then also a global pandemic hits. It was just kind of the worst case scenario, and unfortunately ended up kind of shutting down a good company with high hopes. So but yeah, it's like sad to see, but hey, it's part of the startup world. I hope the founding crew goes off and does another startup. That's one of the things that I know came out of our first startup, badtiming.com. We were an internet advertising company. .com crash hits, and basically ad rates went from like up to $200 CPM down to zero, right? So it's and if we had basically IPO'd or sold like 6 months prior, all would have been rainbows and butterflies. But market timing is everything. So I hope this doesn't discourage them and they go off to do more great things.
Well, and anyway, I mean,
it's always complicated with these startups. I mean, some of them are ahead of time, others, as you said, are late to the game. It really depends, and I think in this particular case, you're right. I mean, we saw this wave of storage accelerators a few years back, and they were being all acquired. I mean, NetApp got one, Microsoft got another, and so on. So at the end, was it the right timing for them to start with? I mean, the problem is there, but there are major players with the technology already in their portfolio, and for some of them, it's just a feature. It's an add-on. It's not even something that you pay for some customers. They need it free. Maybe it's not as good as this one, but free. When you adopted it, I mean, you try the free version of this feature and it works. I mean, you will never, and it solves the 80% of your problem, and that's it. I mean, and it's probably you will never go finding something better, even if. So,
and like that's. It's very niche, right? It's solving a very specific problem. So somebody has to be having that very specific problem and is not using one of the other solutions that has it built in, right? So
I mean, I'm sorry for Infinite.io, but I don't even know if the domain is worth 75,000.
Nah.
I mean.
Probably not.
Yeah, so that's looks like too much.
You killed my sales pitch. I tried to talk it up, and there we go. So I'm cutting you off because we're out of time. We've actually gone over. But it's fascinating stuff, and with any startup, the question you have to ask is what problem I'm solving, and can I solve it better or cheaper than whoever else is trying to solve this problem. And as Jason said, timing is timing is the second everything. The first everything is money. So this week, we've released 2 new reports. The GigaOm Radar for Vulnerability Management by Ibn Rodriguez. It's a fascinating report. Really interesting to see how vulnerability management is taking place and being addressed throughout the industry. We also released a high-performance API management testing benchmark report from William McKnight and Jake Delzer, which compares API 7 and Kong. Both of those are really fascinating reports with a lot of dense information for you. We also have a webinar coming up next week on Tuesday. Just had to check the calendar. And that will be Andrew Brust and Equalum, and the webinar is called Modernize Your Data Pipelines with Multimodal Change Data Capture. You can get all of that at GigaOm. Just go to gigaom.com. You can subscribe to our research. You can buy our research. You can talk to our sales team. You can check out our webinars. You can check our video-on-demand webinars. You can listen to Voices in Innovation. We have a lot of different things that you can kind of interact with and learn so much about the tech industry and where it's going, where it's been, where it is now. I want to thank both Enrico and Jason for joining me today. Jason Collier, you can be found on Twitter at Bocanuts. And next week, we're going to ask you to explain that. And Enrico, you can be found at eSignoretti. And, of course, GigaOm can be found at GigaOm. It's all on the screen to my... There we go. Right there. With that, we are out of time. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And for all your future forward advice, gigaom.com has you covered.
Ciao.